All right. Hello, everybody. Once again, welcome back to Justice with Jax. It is season 3, episode 6. We have another super cool human being for you. I can't wait for them to introduce themselves. And so, as always, today is Friday, August 1, 2025. That's 2 years to the day since the case Armendariz versus City of Colorado Springs was filed by the ACLU of Colorado, or 730 days, if you want to break it down by the numbers. And so I'm going to pass it over to my guests so they can share their affiliations, pronouns, all the good stuff, introduce themselves.
Wonderful. Hi. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to be here. I'm Steph Vigil. I'm a former and future state rep for Colorado's 16th House District. That's my unofficial title these days. You can just hyphenate that. Former and future. That works. She or they pronouns are both good. And I don't know, I wear a lot of hats in the community. I do a little of this and a little of that. I'm a multimodal traveler, so I care a lot about urbanism and transportation choice and infill development and all the things that make a city great for humans. And lately, I am the Interim Executive Director at Citizens Project, which I'll do the short recap and then I'll allow you to kind of ask what illustrative details you'd like. Citizens Project is a civic engagement nonprofit. We've been here since 1992. So back when a lot of the parachurch organizations and big conservative Christian groups showed up, really started pushing for Amendment 2 with like El Paso County as their headquarters for that movement. Enough folks in the city said, "Oh, I know we're kind of a conservative city, but we're not this kind of conservative. This is not okay. This is invasive." Began to push back, and we continue to be relevant for a number of issues, and so we are still here and still holding local power to account.
Thank you, Steph. And a quick note on that. I love providing context. Like, we try to use this as both a vehicle to update on the case and then, like history and what's going on locally. And so the context of that, I think people look at Colorado now and look at us. We have a blue trifecta, but not that long ago, people referred to us as the hate state because of the legislation that was being passed here, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll say that I think that was never really true to like our like statewide identity, because Colorado has kind of this libertarian streak. So sure, like low taxes and like a certain kind of approach to governing that doesn't do a lot of social spending, that we can say all that is problematic. But this idea that it's normal for us to be like anti-choice, anti-queer, like that's actually not normal. And that I think has subsided quite a bit, but it doesn't mean all the other problems don't remain.
Right.
So.
Yes, we know the work continues. And so that's part of what we're going to talk about a little bit more. But a fun fact, too, is that Steph was actually there the day of the housing rights protests that the case in which I'm represented was really the nexus of the catalyst for. And that was July 31, 2021. So how time flies. And I've been reflecting on the case, which is why I was happy to have you as a guest kind of with that reflection with me today for this episode, in that, it took 2 years to even get to the place of the case being filed. And now the case has been filed for 2 years. So this has really taken up 4 years of my life, like my brain space, my emotion. Yeah. I'm not the same person.
Yeah.
Let's call it character building, And so we're still, we were in the Court of Appeals, U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit this May. And they heard our appeal to say, hey, we think the judge, which was Cato Cruz, made a mistake by dismissing our case, right? And so we've been waiting since May, and have come upon the 2-year anniversary of the case today, to hear something back, and we're still waiting there. And so I'm committed to, when we hear something, even if I'm on a season break for the show, I'm going to do an update. But, and so I've been talking about the reflections that I have over literally now it's like 4 years, right? And it's been a lot of processing, and I think trying to stay strong in the midst of this chaos era where, again, the case, when you look at the different elements, feels like a foreshadowing of what's going on today. And in my case, right, there's the First Amendment, which is free speech, and then the Fourth Amendment, privacy. And both of those continue to be rights that we are having to fight for in an unprecedented way with this administration.
Persistently, right?
Yes, and that's why organizations like Citizens Project, it's like there's still going to be plenty of work to do, right? And the local level, as another hat we wear, organizers, the local level is the key, right? And so that has been kind of breathtaking, in addition to watching what I consider a huge federal government scandal at this point, is that we are aware that federal officials have lied to cover up Donald Trump's involvement in this horrific sex abuse scandal, that, you know, that guy who didn't kill himself. I don't even want to say his name because it's more important to center the people who survived and were abused or even lost their lives, right? One of his victims committed suicide not too long ago.
Right, this year.
Yes, this year. And so someone trying, I'm really like, it's not for my health, right? Pushing for this case and showing up, literally showing up as much as I can with it and in other ways. And so watching all of that go on, it's this terrible balance of, it's like, goddamn, I feel really motivated. Like, we have to keep going. And also just, it's that human experience of holding two very polar opposite. I feel some sorrow, and yet I feel like I want to totally kick ass. And if this was still a video show, you would see Steph smiling and nodding because it seems like a familiar feeling.
I've been thinking about that, like, actually, like, a lot this morning. Like, you know, as I was like going to sleep last night, badly, by the way, not falling asleep at a decent hour because
the brain won't
because
stop.
That's how it is lately. Actually, that's just my default. What am I kidding? But I was thinking about this whole, like, like, it's really awful what's going on. And also we've had, you know, former generations that were like born into slavery, died in slavery. Their parents and grandparents were enslaved. Their children and grandchildren were enslaved. They had no way of knowing that it was going to come to an end ever, right? Like, there was no end in sight.
That it hasn't ended.
And so, because of the prison moved around, complex. Yep. And certainly, you know, no reason to suspect that any of the efforts that they made to push in the right direction were going to be felt in their own lifetime, right? You know,
that's planting the seed and hoping it bears fruit.
Hoping it does, and knowing that somebody else is probably going to sit in its shade. And what we hope is that the people who sit in the shade of a tree they didn't plant will feel gratitude, but also feel compelled to move forward, right?
Exactly.
So we've got to do both.
Beautifully said.
And if you don't, like, I mean, I think, like, if you don't take some time to, like, feel the gratitude, feel the joy, you know, I always feel lucky to be alive just because of my past. And so,
that's why you're another perfect guest for this show, because that's what we bring in. We always try to close it out with an attitude of gratitude.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Good. Oh, good. I front loaded it for you.
You front loaded it.
Oh, so that's such a corporate
you're super
thing.
Effective.
Let's circle back to that and table
get
it
some
and
synergy.
whatever. Get some of that going. Put a pin in it, Jess.
All right, that's okay. We'll get back I use that one all the time.
I do too.
Well, let's get back our street cred as organizers and, you know, reflect on that day now, which was yesterday 4 years ago, which, wow, how much does life change in 4 years? The days are long, but that's quotey fingers, but the years are short. And so what could you share for people about what you remember from that day, and, you know, what you remember from reacting like, wow, there's a case been filed? And I just wanted to share another reason why I wanted you on this show was to express gratitude. Thanks for being there that day for me as a friend, a fellow community member, because I'm sure you remember catching up with me afterwards. I had actually, the reason I was at that corner where you guys were, I had pulled over to, like, sob. I just needed a moment to collect, and I still needed more time to collect, because it was, I mean, people argue about the word traumatizing, but that's the word I'm going to use. And then it got more traumatizing for me personally. Yeah. So,
well, and, you know, I don't think that's a stretch, right? We have to consider how many times, you know, law enforcement officials brutalize or kill people in this country. And so if you're confronted with someone who could kill you with impunity, I think you're right to feel like your life kind of flashes before your eyes, right? I mean, They do this stuff all the time. I will say it didn't happen for me quite so much. I still don't like cops sometimes. Like I still feel uncomfortable.
Anxiety.
I still feel uncomfortable with cops sometimes. Mostly that's because of a situation I experienced in a hospital. I won't get into that, but for the most part, I am a white lady, and I know what's up with it, right?
The truth, the reality of our
I'm a meat
systems.
shield. I'm a meat shield.
Yeah.
So that was honestly kind of the role I played that day. I was like, I can see that, unfortunately, some of our mutual friends were not helping their case much with the way they interacted, but that's their right. You're allowed to yell
That
at cops.
does fall
It's
under
actually
the
not
First
illegal
Amendment.
to yell at cops. I think it's not the best strategy, but whatever. It's their
More
right.
flies with honey. Okay.
Sure. Right. Yeah, exactly. But, it is what it is. In any case, I was like, well, I'm not letting people get hurt if I can help it. So I just kind of stood in between. I actually specifically remember there was one of the officers, by the way, just for a reminder for everyone, we're talking like a demonstration.
Group.
Yeah, a demonstration of like 30 to, I think it was like 30 to 35
I would say
people.
tops 30, maybe
30.
35.
And we had, if you consider
all
like
ages, we had the elderly, some kids.
elderly folks, people with mobility devices, people with strollers. Like this is not I don't know, man. This is not like an Antifa army.
I was just gonna
Do you know
say,
what I
it's
mean?
we didn't meet up to be Antifa. That's not what was happening.
Nobody was armed. Nobody, right? Like, not that I know of. Wait, honestly, even if they had been, apparently that's their right too. So let's get real, right? It was like, if you figure like 12 or more patrol cars, and at least they all have at least two. So like, what do we have? Like a couple dozen?
The ratio was
probably
2 to 3 officers.
2 to 3 officers for every one of
protester.
us. And like, is this the threat, really?
With ARs.
Is
That's
this the
part
threat? I mean,
that bothered me.
Guys.
Their weaponry.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
Full SWAT gear. And then if you
Yeah.
recall, it was the sesquicentennial. And so it was just, I remember the energy was so hyped.
Yeah.
Like, and I think maybe it was a mix of even that being like a celebration was going on. And we know now from some of the records in the case that the cops were like expecting people to start shit. And that was never the objective or intent with that protest.
Because we were going to cross the street, not directly at a crosswalk, I guess. That's the big crime.
It's very criminal.
And of course, as a multimodal traveler, you know how I feel about that, right? Human beings have a right to exist outside of their home and travel around freely. I think cars need to be restricted, not people.
The steel cages that we speed around in.
Totally. But it was this whole, as I recall, and I remember I didn't go to a ton of the planning meetings and whatnot. I had been at one of them.
I went to none of the planning. I casually
really
showed
the
up.
move was like, hey, we have like this list of demands from the city, right? We want more affordable housing. We want rights and dignity.
I wanted to
we
learn
want
more about those.
better homelessness services. Yes. It was sort of a whole list of like these, like if we got everything we wanted, it would be all this stuff. Like, please take action on these things. And what we were going to do was take a walk from like Dorchester Park, which, for folks not in the know is, a park that's been largely abandoned by the city, and a lot of unhoused folks just kind of camp out there. And so
when we say abandoned, that means they put like cement bolsters to make sure people aren't parking there anymore. No more maintenance on the facilities to that extent.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are some interesting geographical reasons why that park in particular, I won't dive into it another episode, but there are that aren't necessarily like, oh, homeless people are so terrible, look what they did to this park. Like, that's ridiculous to me. But that's where we started, and we were going to walk up to Pioneer Square, which is where the Alamo Square, whatever, where the Pioneers Museum, Alamo Square, where the Pioneers Museum is. Big sesquicentennial celebration. Happy birthday, Colorado Springs. I love my hometown. And we're just going to walk up to that, and there's going to be a little press conference. There was something about, I thought like Mayor Suthers was supposed to come out and like receive there's some sort of planned thing that was actually pretty like mutual. Like there was some like, hey, there's going to be like these folks have like a housing demonstration. They're choosing this particular weekend because we're celebrating the city. Well, and we should celebrate the city by making her the best version of herself, I think, right? So we're going to walk up there, hand this stuff off to the mayor, have a little press conference. It was going to be fine.
It was the day before the evictions moratorium at the federal level. So I remember that being a huge motivator for people as well, because it was, COVID was still going on. And that was going to be a major implication for people if the extension didn't pass, which I think ultimately it did. But I remember that's why people were hyped too, with that on their minds.
I'd forgotten about that timing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That too. So yeah, it's just sort of like, I don't know, man. Like, we're just walking down the sidewalk. We're not, you know what I mean? Even if like people bled into the street a little bit, it's like,
dared
man,
to.
Also, like, they closed off the street to
First.
confront us. So it was like, oh, okay, well, you know,
then we'll walk here.
I guess
Thanks,
we'll walk.
buddies.
I guess we're gonna bleed over into the shoulder. Also, just side note, we don't make our sidewalks accommodating or wide enough for more than one or two people to walk abreast, right?
True.
So there's that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm just thinking about a mutual
Just
friend
the-
of ours who use like a cane, a walker, or whatever, who are like, well, I also kind of like have to get around these massive cracks and holes in the sidewalk because of decades of backlogged sidewalk maintenance. I'm just gonna put that out in the public anytime
Yeah.
I can. So like, you know, just all of the, I feel like the way that all that kind of added up just felt so to me like so indicative of like the worst, I don't know, the worst tendencies of how we govern in this country lately, right? We're
Why I
trying to
feel-
walk somewhere to highlight a housing emergency, the like big city sponsored event, which by the way is like a little village of walkability that everybody really loves
Really
to drive
likes.
to and be at for at least a while. I mean,
Yeah.
certainly it's very desirable to
Maybe
be in
we
a
could
walkable, compact
make that
space, isn't it?
a
With a bunch of
value.
small businesses.
Yeah.
Well, look how much we love that. So we're walking to that. We're demanding things that are pretty fair to demand of people. And the what we're confronted with is, you know, this law enforcement agency that we're told over and over again is strapped for funding, doesn't have enough sworn officers, can't keep enough cops out there to keep people safe. We're in danger all the time because there aren't enough of them. And yet we can spare like a dozen patrol cars and dozens of officers to put a stop to what? What's the threat?
Yeah.
What are we doing? And I feel like if anything, the danger started when they showed up. And we've seen that happen in a few other, you know,
Right.
government v citizens kind of thing.
situations indeed. And I, even with reflection, a piece of me feels that it's something we've certainly seen from police agencies where they bait people. And I think that there has been definitely from the people who were there that day some observations that you can't help but walk away from that kind of feeling like that, given the way that it was just a complete exaggeration, overkill, right, in their reaction.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Yeah.
look, I'm from the border where I could cross and visit into Ciudad Juarez and see like armed military Mexican police, and I don't think that my hometown's police force should be reminding me of like the Mexican military.
Oof, right.
Military's in our streets, right? So that's a big piece of that day for me that was really disturbing. And just with kind of the color of the situation, like there were helicopters flying overhead, and I think that was from the sesquicentennial, right? Or I was like, was that
Possibly.
for us? I know they had drone footage of us, because some of that is materials from my case, right? And again, the case highlights with that free speech element that this overreaction was because they are operating off of false premises and criminalizing our political beliefs, which are, you know, God forbid the police somehow get a bug in their ear that people who want walkability are leftist terrorists,
Right.
you know? And so I would use that as a silly, ridiculous example of we were people who had been working on community food pantries. In my case, I was doing community bike rides. Like, yeah, where is the threat? There wasn't one because they were operating off of false premises, which in the end ended up violating my civil rights because they not only did they target the free speech, which they're not allowed to as the government, right? An extension of the government, that Fourth Amendment, that privacy piece, basically trying to fish into my life and make me into, see if there's anything to make me into a criminal in their eyes.
Right.
And then to me, the very clear message of sit down, shut up, little girl. We're going to put you in a device blackout. I don't know if you've been in a situation where you can't communicate with anyone, right? Like you
Right.
don't have anyone's number. It genuinely feels like a blackout. That's a fucking terrible feeling.
Yeah.
And I lived that because of CSPD and the FBI. and their Joint Terrorism Task Force. So it is important to reflect, but here we are 4 years later, and as we mentioned, a lot has changed. So that being said, some of what I wanted to hear from you about was a concept we definitely talk on this show about, and anything else you want to add about that day 4 years ago, the protest. But as we talked about, it takes different hats for some of us to wear to get things going. And as you mentioned, you've got that state house experience going for that again. You helm a nonprofit. So the concept of you got to stay committed consistently to move the needle, and even putting it like move the needle doesn't sound exactly totally exciting or fulfilling.
It doesn't,
but you've been a gig worker. With all your lived experience, how would you tell someone cynical about politics or being involved in community why that matters? And kind of, do you have a favorite story? There's probably a lot, but that kind of illustrates that point.
Yeah. I think that the cynicism specifically is such a powerful tool for people in positions of like privileged positions, right? It's very convenient for people in power for you to feel like there's nothing you can do about it. And like you can't check them, you can't change what they do, that you don't have any influence or, ability to shift the power balance. It's so convenient for them, for you to think that, if you're one of those people. Right. And I think sometimes our culture and our, pop culture landscape really does us dirty on this, because we've all seen like a revolutionary montage in a film, right?
A montage that is like, what, 2 minutes? Yeah, right. Homie.
2 minutes.
Try 20
and it's
years.
The coolest parts, right? It's the parts that make for a good trailer.
Yeah.
It's the, right. Like,
well said.
It's really fun to kind of think like, I put out, like an alternative newspaper with my friends, and then we marched in the street, and then like we went out for drinks afterward, and we changed the world. Yeah. And like,
a little more complicated
good
than
for
that.
you,
Yeah.
right? But it's also like all of the stuff that, like we said at the top, all of the hard work that has come before us in order for us to continue to have a fighting chance.
We stand on the shoulders of giants.
Those are some strong shoulders, and like they're not those folks weren't like any better equipped than we are. They weren't better than us. Frequently, they were far less resourced.
Precisely.
And they're not magical people. Frankly, most of them contributed very little or nothing at all, and some people gave a lot. Or everything, but it's all valid. It's all valid because we're all just living our lives here, right? So I think you got to remember you're not trying to change the world in a movie. You're trying to change the world in real life.
Yeah.
And the things that work the most frequently don't feel like it while you're doing them. They don't feel like it.
I agree with you on
right?
that. Yeah.
I think like, if you're wanting to, for instance, I said I'm a multimodal traveler. I'm super out of shape. Actually, I'm not fit at all. I ride a bike, I walk, but like, I'm not like, I can't go run a marathon today, but I actually technically could, right? If I like, my legs work. If I wanted to go from like, I don't run at all to I can run a marathon, there would be like a series of actionable steps that I could take over a period of time, right? Certainly if time were no object, if I could just take my however long I need to with it.
We love a good training montage.
Right. And of course, like this isn't, I'm kind of imagining like Rocky running on the beach, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That looks really cool. But in reality, like if you want to go from like, I don't run at all to I can run a marathon, it's a lot of really boring mornings of like getting up and stretching and doing a light jog.
Consecutively.
And drinking those like nasty protein shakes or whatever it is that people do, right? And it'll be weaved into your everyday life because of course it will. Like you've still got to do your laundry, and you still have to fill your prescriptions
dishes.
And oh my God, the
That's
dishes,
my thing
right?
This week. Yeah.
Good Lord. Yeah. No, I left some behind this morning, and I was like, well,
that's what's happening.
Wait.
Yeah.
And sometimes like the revolution has to wait because I need to unload the dishwasher today.
Right. Look, I think it's important to say that. We're speaking
life
reality here.
Carries on. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? If you can't. And so like one of the things I've got on my whiteboard in my home office right now, it just says like, it just says like, if you can't sustain the effort, it won't work. You have to be able to sustain it.
Yeah.
You have to.
Marathon, not a sprint.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And so out of the experiences that you have, do you have it. It's probably hard to pick, but one for this show that a story you might share with, whether it's someone working with Citizens Project or you've worked with constituents, other community organizations, but that stands out to you that is kind of like just reminding people, like you said, I think it's really true. Oftentimes you just don't realize the impact you had on someone, and then it reaches you in the weirdest like circular way, and you're like, whoa, this is why I do this.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of them because, like I said at the kind of the beginning of this, I'm really intentional about reflecting regularly, right? Like stopping to notice that I've come a long way, or community has come a long way, or right, like the things that I'm doing are working. You just don't always notice them until you're looking backwards. So keep going.
Keep going.
There have been a number of times since I was no longer in office where I've had some people come up to me at the grocery store or, in a parking lot outside the library, whatever, and are just sort of like, grab my hand. They're like, first of all, you're running again, right? And I said, yes, absolutely, I'm running again. And it's actually really sad how many times I've had somebody be like, man, like it was just nice for once to have like somebody who cares about buses and cycling, or someone who cares about, like ignored issues like gig worker rights or what happens to renters when they're applying for apartments or and very
you mean
frequently
real life
stuff, things that are I'm a little hesitant sometimes to use the phrase, like kitchen table issues, because it's weaponized so much.
Yeah.
But it's also like, dude, anything that impacts somebody who sits at your table is by definition a kitchen table issue. So, some number of, moms with trans kids who kind of come up and be like, for 2 lovely years, I had a representative who doesn't, hate my family. That was nice.
Yeah.
I'd like to get that back, crying grandmothers. And I'm just like, oh no, like, I know. It kind of makes me, it kind of makes me feel like there had to have been a day when I could have stayed out a bit longer and I might have gotten those other votes. You know what I mean? And I do. I've had that from folks, or they'll kind of stop somewhere and be like, hey, I was going to vote for somebody. Somebody came up to me at Pride, actually, and I was like, dude, like I'm working my C3 job.
Yeah,
like,
don't
I
talk
hear
to
you,
me
I
about
see
that.
you, I hear
Thank
you,
you.
I see you, thank you. We'll catch up later.
Yeah, we'll catch
and this
up
guy
later.
just like stopped and like looked through the crowd at the booth and was like, hey, like pointed at me like not in an aggressive way, just sort of. It was funny, and I was like, hey, I was gonna come volunteer for your campaign, and I never got around to it, and I regularly think if I had, maybe I could have gotten those. I was like, oh man, you, me, everyone else, we all think who could have gotten well, I'll tell you where the votes come from, and we'll tie this into our local action. It's down ballot drop off. It's people who vote the top of the ticket thinking those are the quote unquote important races. Those are the big ones. And certainly those are the ones where they recognize the names the most because the political landscape is so dependent on like the broader, media communications world where you get whatever is put in front of you the most. You know about what is put in front of you the most. So you have name recognition for the people at the top of the ticket. You know about those offices because that's what's on the news all the time. And then they just stop voting the rest of the ballot once they've gotten through those because they don't recognize them. They don't feel confident about it. And I will say that, like, as a general rule, like left-leaning voters are different from right-leaning voters in this regard. Most right-leaning and even moderate folks like vote the whole ballot and they vote their party the whole ballot. And then it's when you get to left-leaning folks, they're sort of like, well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. But then like, oh, if I don't actually know about this office or about these candidates, I don't want to make the wrong decisions. I just won't at all.
Yeah.
Which is like, really too bad. I wish people would, you don't
think about it differently.
You don't have to be an expert. And I will tell you, there are a lot of people who are also not educated about those offices, and they very confidently vote a straight ticket regardless. So, like, just do your best.
Do your best. Yes,
just
let's emphasize that. Don't skip it. Don't skip the down ballot, but do your best.
Right. And the crazy thing is that that's where your vote matters the most. Like, I don't want to say that, like, the issues matter. I think it has the most weight. The smaller the pool of voters who participate in a given race, like a state house race or a city council or a school board or what have you, the more weight every individual vote has. So like you're leaving more power on the table than if you actually did the reverse and like skip the top and only voted the bottom. That would actually be less impactful.
Well said. So I'm hoping anyone who comes across this episode is getting really rich food for thought as they're listening to that. And another way that I'd like to express it to people is like this local government is genuinely like the closest level of government to you, right?
Yeah.
That city government is the ones you're ideally reporting the pothole to and seeing it fixed speedily. We could totally get into potholes just because I feel for the maintenance teams and people's maybe lack of context about how weather affects
It's hard here.
roads, especially in Colorado.
Really.
And so everyone loves to hate on how many potholes there are, but they also want to hate on when the potholes are getting filled and traffic is bad. And let's talk, you're laughing, and I'd love to hear from you about what that level of governance kind of looks like because of that dynamic, right? Where you're working with this smaller pool of constituents, which is, I think, great for communication for the officials who do their jobs well, but a challenge.
Right.
And then especially a challenge with the context, like you said, that's often missing because, you know, part of my job with my other hat for that county commissioner, District 5, is letting people know in an accessible way what a county commissioner job is.
What they
right?
do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's different than the city, right? Because the city is,
Right.
we have a home rule charter, but also the city does municipal stuff that is specific to the city. And the counties are actually subdivisions of the state. So the Board of Commissioners for the county is actually the administrative arm, like the local administrative arm for the state of Colorado. So
this bullshit dynamic of a totally antagonistic El Paso County Commission board that spends more time putting an FU letter to Jared Polis on their website than making the maps to see for voters to access on their website to see who their representative is. Like, to me, that's part of why I'm running. I can see where the priorities have been, and I know people want something different, which is to have their needs and their realities met. Like, it's really disturbing. We talked about it on the last episode. You were there too. There was a public comment because there is serious concern that ICE facilities could open up here in Colorado Springs. And some of the feedback I heard was the county commission basically just acted like nothing had happened. Like, so many people poured out their guts, their heart and soul to them about this crisis and it's just gonna
including, I'm just thinking like, you know, descendants of Holocaust survivors who are like, don't do this, you know, hashtag never again every year on Remembrance Day, and then sit here and do nothing while ethnic cleansing goes down in our community. That's not okay, right? There's all this. I mean, I think this is the thing that people miss, right? There's like presidential race. That's the one nationwide race. We've got our federal stuff, our statewide races, or all of that. But like all of the local offices that are really close to home have so much implementation power over all of that other stuff. And like, you know, who the president is or is not going to have an immediate impact on whether, like, I don't know, our libraries stay open.
Yeah.
Not an immediate impact. In the long run, yes. I will say, like, usually like a president's legacy and it's, you know, their impact on the country over the long haul is usually not going to be felt for several until they're long gone, actually, which is kind of an interesting thing. Dumb side note, this is actually part of the reason I kind of love how like Mexico does like the 1 6-year term for their presidency, because you shouldn't, I feel like there's some logic to that, right? You shouldn't be running for reelection based on the current climate for a seat that doesn't have short-term impacts so much as long-term impacts. But in the local sense, like it's our city council and county commission who appoint the library board of trustees. And we've already had one library close, and they're looking at potentially closing another, and they're stifling the funding. They've got book banners on that board of trustees, right? And so like it matters who's on your council if that's what they're going to do, right? We have publicly owned utilities in Colorado Springs, which is a great benefit to us. Colorado Springs City Council is the board of the utility board.
Utilities, yeah.
So
fun fact always makes me laugh in the sense that it's like, isn't that like the most communist socialist thing to have like
Do you know that Jared Polis calls it our dirty little socialist secret?
No,
which is
that's
hilarious.
funny.
Like, I think he's
It
being
is.
funny, but I also think like,
It's funny.
well, there was an article in the Gazette when it was formed, when the public utility was formed, like saying that we had gone socialist and like it was all like, it was just all going to,
This is the end of the world.
this is it.
Yeah.
Like, it's over. Game over for Colorado Springs. And in the meantime, like nobody in this state has more like reliable, low cost, cleaner energy than Colorado Springs utilities,
Can I
right?
take
I like other municipal utilities kind of too, but like we're one of the largest force service utilities in the country, actually.
It's impressive.
It's
You know
really
what
impressive. They
their
do
budget
really
is.
good
It's
business.
Huge,
Yeah.
like billion with a B.
Yeah.
At least 1 billion, right?
And if they raise our rates to keep up with, change in like the, total energy cost or the water
electric grid
procurement or
and
something
so
like
on and
that,
so
they
forth,
bring
yeah.
it back down after it. Right? Like,
I try to
Excel would never. Excel would never do that. The rates go in one direction, and it's always going
It's a
up, and they're not going to bring
corporation.
it back down. They're not going to do
profit
that.
margins are their priority, right?
That's-
Whereas
yeah.
a dirty little socialist secret like
Yeah.
Colorado Springs
Yeah.
Utilities, different story.
Yeah.
Okay, I would love to take a quick beat actually, because I'm throwing a curveball in the sense like this is going to go to, and if you don't have details, not a problem. But I saw recently that the county commission, for example, unanimously voted down Excel's transmission line expansion. I'm so interested to know more about that because part of what my understanding is, it's really going to be a connecting piece for the overall U.S. grid, which is important. And as far as I know, as much American infrastructure is not where it needs to be for our needs. So I was fascinated to see, and it when it comes to like the political tone to it, because there always is, right? Like I see this corporation coming in and they're probably like not talking in the language that the community needs. And so a couple of red counties, Elbert, I think Lincoln, they're basically like, F off. Like that, to tell that corporation no is some of the power that they can flex as a rural community, that typically they feel ignored. The Front Range outpopulates them, so statewide issues they feel prickly about. And I found it so interesting. Our commission, though, was kind of towing that party line. And at one point, there was a quote from like a constituent about turning like that eastern area into a green energy dumping ground. And I was like, I don't think that's a thing, but I want to know more about what you mean by that. So anyway, if you have any extra thoughts, if you were tracking that issue, because I know Citizens Project, part of the objective is tracking local issues. So that's a fun, like nerdy one that is infrastructure.
I honestly will tell you, I'm not super well versed on it. I have like a headline level of knowledge about this resolution. So Citizens Project actually historically has tried to do like this balance of like state level policy and some local policy. And I think, as we're growing into our next era, we've been through a lot of leadership transitions, a lot of like growing pains over the last handful of years as an organization. Some things that are going to happen if you're around for 30 years or more, right?
Exactly.
I think especially because the governing majority at the state level has shifted dramatically since we were formed. I think like basically where do we put our focus now in order to ensure that the sort of like equity, inclusion, justice, diversity values that we have are being realized wherever we have influence. And so the local is definitely like where we're moving toward. But I think like it hasn't necessarily been like embraced and enacted the way that I would like us to have done. So under my leadership, we will definitely be doing that. But we haven't kept an eye on those things like I would like to see. I don't think we have quite the presence in local meetings that would be good for us to have. There are a lot of very right-wing organizations that are local watchdogs, and I know they're at county commission meetings, and they're at city council meetings, and they're at all the school boards. And then, you know, for folks who are more like justice and equality minded, a little less so. So I think we end up missing things like that. And this is exactly one of the reasons why I think we need more presence. We need more presence in Centennial Hall, City Hall.
We can work
all
on
of
that.
those boardrooms. Yep.
No lack of work. And good point. And I appreciate that. I think that when I heard about this issue, I was like, maybe I'm going to have to do a whole episode about it, because it's definitely one of those areas where, see if this resonates with you. But as we try to be informational, collaborative with our neighbors and moving things forward, that communication piece is key. And I really think that we have a problem in our society, or kind of discourse right now, where I call it the bumper sticker mentality, because people try to reduce these important political and policymaking topics into like 3 words, and it's just not, it's a disservice to everyone. And it honestly, it's a little bit, it's on both sides, not to be like both sidesism or thing, but lock her up. There was also defund the police, right? And both of those had their critiques for obviously very different reasons. But what are your thoughts on that piece of kind of communication? Because I feel like when we're trying to coalition build and bring people in, really just making sure government is accessible and having a structure where people are keeping government accountable. Like, that's what that is when people are showing up to meetings and watching, right? So we're working with that dynamic these days, and it's a very noisy environment.
Yeah. I mean, is it, so I think I agree that it's like at a higher degree right now. I think also we like kind of forget that a lot of this is just normal human stuff, right? Like we only have, we only have so much people only have so much bandwidth. And our brains did not evolve to like make us be more accurate. They evolved to keep us alive. And so like your brain has a natural negative bias, right? You're more likely to glom your attention onto something that's why is potentially a threat.
Meta makes all that money.
They make so much money off of it, right? And like we can be mad all we want at the tech companies, and we should, because they shouldn't be like exploiting this tendency, but they're also not like putting something new in our heads that we've never thought of before, right? We are going to kind of latch on to things that give us a sense that I need to pay attention to this because it's a problem. And if you want to do more than that, you have to actually be really intentional about it, right? Like, I don't know, practicing gratitude, right? And stopping to be reflective. You have to do that intentionally. That doesn't just come to you naturally as a Homo sapiens
human being.
Just sort of like a big brain primate, like moving through an excessively complicated world that you did not evolve for. And that is hard to make sense of. So I don't know. I mean, I think like we have to come up with our own way of addressing that conflict between, we need people to pay attention now. We need to be able to communicate to people in a way that they can receive it and absorb it. And also the issues at hand are too complex and multifaceted to be actually communicated that quickly and efficiently. And we've always been able to come up with a way of doing that, right? Like it's, I'm just thinking about like the political cartoons and whatnot of, 100 plus years ago. Boomers will complain about meme culture now, but it's like, this is actually how political figures used to communicate things to people, especially because before universal education, not everyone could read. So you had to have imagery
to express.
You had to have that.
The concepts.
And even if that's not an issue now, we have this new element of just like explosive technology, everybody having a device in their pocket
with
at all
AI
times.
slop on top
with
of it.
AI slop on, yes.
What is going on? Is how that makes me feel.
And strangely, like the people most susceptible to it are tend to be older folks, not younger folks, right? Because they're not used to seeing things that are that convincing, that are like the AI power is not like a regular part of their tech landscape. They're not what it's like digital natives or whatever, right? They're not digital natives. So I mean, I think like we just got to find our own way of doing it that's relevant to our own time.
I appreciate that. I think some of the ways I think I'm trying to contribute my part with this show. I think another way to get around the noise is actually something very key to humanity, which is that IRL, like we are gathering, we are face to face, we're connecting. And I know, really mind-blowing concepts here, but especially in the wake of the pandemic, which disrupted that in such a, again, unprecedented way. But it's something we talk about here, where that community, that is healing, that is medicine. And so building that is how we get around some of these, significant realities that are challenges that we're facing.
Yeah. Well, this is a lot of the reason I'm such a land use nerd too, because we are literally physically divided in pretty extreme ways. There was so we just did this whole there's this whole housing needs assessment that the state, by the way, the state funded, local governments get to do it, get to carry it out to their liking. There was a question in there that I just thought was so fascinating. It was basically like, do you agree that like people of different income levels should live in the same neighborhood? And I was sort of like, wow, I was sort of fascinated by that. I mean, I'm glad the question was there though, because I think like people who genuinely think that we should be separated by class.
People say yes.
There are folks who genuinely believe that. They genuinely believe that like a neighborhood is a unit of people who are in the same tax bracket who deserve to, especially if they're in the higher brackets, they deserve to be insulated against and preserved against lesser
and if that means
people
segregation
with less money, right?
Yeah.
And like, no coincidence here, most of those restrictive land use laws do in fact come from Jim Crow and redlining and racial apartheid, right? That's what they're for. That's what they were made for. Hopefully that's not why most people want to preserve them anymore, but they are hanging around and they're having a very similar effect. And it is not only along racial lines, but also like because there's sort of this bizarre like race class interaction in our country historically. It just means that it also hits poor people of any shade. And that's just it's just such an odd thing to, once you see that, you can't unsee it. Truly. And I don't know, just the way it harms communities, the way it harms families, the way that kids can't get out and just play with other kids in the neighborhood anymore because it's not, we've made the neighborhood for cars, and no wonder you're sitting inside on your phone scrolling through Instagram as a teenager, right? Before you start, hating on kids for, being on TikTok and
on the screen,
TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat and whatever. I don't know what the kids are on these days. Is it still? Hopefully, I hope it's still TikTok. That's where I am.
It's TikTok.
I don't know. I never did a lot of those. I don't. Yeah, I'm not. I'm not actually that savvy with it. I can't keep up with the kiddos. I'm an old already. But
I'm with you.
No wonder they're inside on their screens. Somebody else made it for them, put it in their hands, destroyed the walkability of their neighborhood.
We've
and
been
like
handed a dumpster fire.
Now we don't know each other. Like go figure, right?
Yeah.
So,
and why that would be truly a negative impact, and why the reverse, connecting with your neighbors, actually is a health determinant,
It is.
And when I think of my neighborhood, and kids not going outside, part of that is, in our case, right, compared to the rest of different parts of the city, we have the heat island effect because we don't have as many trees as the higher income, older areas of this town. And so, we're going to go off. That's a whole other episode.
But I mean, it's the way that it feeds the isolation is real. And I think like if we want to like gain a level of social cohesion that we haven't before, then we need to start eliminating barriers and get back to each other more frequently. Right. And,
beautiful thing.
And like unplanned and spontaneous ways. Right. That's how most human interaction has been. Right. Like, you didn't have to make a play date for your kid to have a friend. Right. I think like God, I would really like it if the way that I bumped into my friends was to just see them at the coffee shop or bar or where we both frequent. And instead it just kind of feels like, man, it's another thing I have to plan, and we've got to like put it in the calendar, and we've got to,
which is how this
wonder we
episode
don't
happened.
Socialize, man. Sure. But I mean, just to go for a walk with a friend or have a beer or something, like, think about how much we're missing out on because we don't do that organically anymore.
Well said.
So much.
It's good to remind people of that. Yeah. And so I think now I definitely wanted to leave time and space for, let's talk a little bit more about CP. I know that you mentioned kind of where the future direction is going, any calls to action, how can people support, donate, some events coming up, what you got going on?
Yeah. So citizensproject.org, sign up for our newsletter, follow our socials. We are kind of just popping up in the community whenever we have the opportunity. Right now, there's a couple of tabling events coming up. I don't know when this episode will come out, but we'll be at Hillside Community Center on the 9th for their big back to school thing. There's a Housing Legal Services Day coming up with the Justice Center. We'll be there on the 29th. We just had our big annual breakfast event. Yeah. And one of the things we're trying to do, honestly, is more of these kind of low stakes, low barrier, just come make friends kind of events, specifically because of that, the deficit of opportunities. As we're moving forward and kind of thinking about, putting together a new strategic plan, because organizations need to do that periodically. We're really looking with an eye to how do we make meaningful change here at home? There's lots of statewide, or not that we won't do the state stuff, but there's a lot of statewide organizations that monitor the legislature, that, report out on the legislative session, that keep an eye on bills, that sort of thing. And that, we can also do that, but those organizations definitely can't monitor school boards the way that we can. They're not here. The library closure issue is a big one. The ICE detention centers is a threat. School boards poorly implementing or refusing to implement state laws that protect LGBTQ youth, right? That's important for us.
And I thank you for that, just on a personal note, because some of my gripes here in this community is our media ecosystem, which this is why this show exists as well. Just adding some balance. The reporting on the XL issue that I mentioned, I was like, this is kind of a bummer. I want to know a lot more, and I have so many more questions now that this article answers.
Yeah.
And so anything that, Citizens Project is contributing in that regard, I think in this community has such value. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, in the past, so we kind of came up at the same time as the old Colorado Springs Independent. Right? When we had a full-fledged independent newspaper.
It's not even
I know.
Yeah.
And of course, our friends at the Pikes Peak Bulletin are doing their level best. They've had, at the time of this recording, they've put a pause on their print edition because they've got financial challenges. And of course, with, they're not publicly funded, they're locally funded, but, the pool of funds that is out there for print and broadcasting is shrinking because of the federal cuts. Yeah. So, I will say, for folks who if you have money to work with, the local entities need it more.
Yeah.
The local entities need it more.
Yeah.
They can't go tap into nationwide funds if they don't have nationwide reach, and they're trying to serve you locally. So donate locally. That would be my biggest plea to folks, even if it's,
keep it local.
Even if it's man, I have $5 a month to spare for something like this. Great, don't
It'll
send
make
it.
A difference.
Don't send it to a nationwide thing if you don't, I don't tell anybody what to do, but we need it more here, right?
Yeah.
We need it more at a local level. And I'll say for Citizens Project, one of the things that is a challenge for us right now, and this is going to sound kind of odd, but our biggest funding source is one really big funding source that sort of makes us lopsided. And we're very grateful to have it, and it definitely has helped our organization immensely. And also it kind of becomes a challenge to stay connected to community and stay relevant to community when we don't have a lot of local buy-in. And so one of my goals is to really bring up the number of folks who contribute to Citizens Project or volunteer for us on a small and local scale, right? I want those $5 and $10 donors, and
that's the
I
community
want,
building.
I want those
again.
folks who will, you know, show up for an action team or stuff some envelopes or make a few calls or something. Even if you can only do it once, it helps. And, you know,
it does. And you'll probably make a friend.
You'll make a friend.
That's,
or, you know,
another part of the joy of doing this work. Like, it's hard. Yeah, it takes time. But you meet amazing people and experience things that just touch you to your core, right? And make you feel like you can keep going. Or like, this is why I do this. I love... I'm grateful for that.
Like, this is what the work actually is.
Yes,
you know?
I'm really grateful for that.
Somebody said something to me the other day about like, oh, wow, like, I love that you're calling me about this. This must be a lot of work to get through all of these phone calls. And I was like, well, but it is the work. Like, this is it. Like, me calling you to talk to you about this issue is the job. So
I do love that.
like, this is what we're supposed to be doing. So, you know, the load's not going to get any lighter is the thing, right? The load's not going to get any lighter, but the lift can get lighter when there's more of us. That's what does the trick.
Beautifully said. And I'll kind of close that with one of our final questions is we always like to check in and just ask what's good in your life. See, that's the attitude with gratitude section of our show. Man.
There's a bunch.
I know. Good. I like that.
Yeah. So we'll say my cat was laying on the bed last night.
Hattie, right?
Hattie. Yeah. You know, I might talk about my cat a lot.
I do the same thing.
She was doing the thing where she was like snoring softly in her sleep. But then she also had her little paws in front of her face and she was like twitching when her little paws was
What an adorable dream.
And I was like,
You're the best.
You need to live forever.
I know.
You need to not be like other cats who
immortal
eventually shuffle off this mortal coil and leave a big hole behind in my life.
Four-legged
You need to live forever. But anyway, she's a wonderful cat and I love the kitties. And you know what? Crazy cat lady. I'll take it.
Same here. Like, let it be known. We definitely stand crazy cat ladies on this show. So thank you, my friend. I really appreciate it. The time has flown by. Here's where I remind folks that episodes of Justice with Jax are recorded as a member of the Studio 809 Podcast Collective at the Next Us Community Co-working Space in downtown Colorado Springs. Remember to ask yourself 2 questions. Who's telling your story, and how are you being the change you want to see in the world today? This is Justice with Jax, signing off.